Joining us today, we have Doris Heitzman here from Florida Friendly Landscaping, and we're so excited to have her. You know, with when we talk about wellness, we talk about the 4 pillars of well-being, and we really believe that for true wellness, we've got to find a balance between not just physical health, but social, emotional, and financial health. And gardening is a great path to well-being. We have physical well-being built into that. We have some emotional well-being. It can be very therapeutic to dig in the dirt. There's the financial piece. If you are growing vegetables or herbs, you can save some money. And there can certainly be a social element to that if you've got your family kind of engaged in that, or some of you I know have community gardens and there's a community there. But Doris is going to talk specifically about the 9 principles of Florida Friendly Landscaping. This is the introductory class. They do offer more, and we are going to be hosting classes, additional classes on Florida Free Landscaping later in the year on subsequent topics. So thank you, Doris. I will turn off my camera and let you do your thing.
Thank you, Jane. Great introduction and welcome everybody. Glad to have you here. And thank you, Jane and Human Resources for having me. I've done that class a few months ago, but due to popular demand, I'm teaching it again. So let me share my screen here and that we can start with the PowerPoint. Okay, everybody should be able to see the PowerPoint. What you see here is our partners that I'd like to introduce for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. The Florida Friendly Landscaping Program is a program of the University of Florida, IFAS Extension, and IFAS stands for Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. And then we do have, of course, Tampa Bay Water, our wholesale water supplier of the region, who is supporting the program, the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, throughout the Tri-County area, and of course, Pinellas County. And today we talk about Introduction to Florida Friendly Landscaping. I am Doris Heitzman, the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Manager. And I talked with Jane a little before. I have been in this position, not in exact that position, but doing similar outreach since 2006. So this is my 17th year here. And yeah, you need to love gardening. It's just great. And the combination of educating homeowners and community associations on these principles has been a great ride. So with that, I want to just briefly touch on and let you know about the Tampa Bay Waterwise rebate program. If you do live in one of these counties or cities and get water supplied by Tampa Bay Water indirectly through the county, so Pinellas County Utilities is buying the water from Tampa Bay Water wholesale and then distributes it among our residents here. So if you are in any of these counties or cities, as I said, use that link below. And you can see if you are eligible for a rebate, either as a resident, commercial property owner, contractor, builder, and so forth, and see if you can get something out of that for indoors or outdoors rebates. I will share my, and this is recorded as well, but I will share my PowerPoint. I can also share the link and you can try that later. And with that, we are jumping right in. What is a Florida Friendly Landscape? It's created by incorporating and practicing the concept of Florida Friendly Landscaping, which is the 9 principles, and we incorporate them into designing and maintaining our landscape, managing our landscape. So it's not only how we maintain it, it's really, really important how it's designed. And we'll go through all the principles, but before I do that, I'd like you to have a look at these 6 pictures here. And just take note for yourself, maybe if you can remember or put it on a piece of paper, which of these yards or gardens would you consider, without knowing much about the program, about the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, which of these gardens would you think would be considered Florida friendly? Just take note of it and plot down A, B, C, D, E, F, each of one or some of them or whatever you think. I'll leave it up a little bit more and you can look at them again. So just take note of that, and we'll talk about it at the end, which of these are Florida friendly. Okay, so what is the goal of a Florida friendly landscape? It's attractive, functional, low in maintenance, with the result of saving water and energy, reducing pollutants, providing wildlife habitat, and it also recycles on site. So here are the 9 principles, and we go through all of them. And if you look at them closely, the right plant, right place is the most important one, because if you choose the right plant for the right locations, you're off to a successful landscape. That takes a little bit of homework, but once you have it down, this is the key principle for a successful landscape. I would also include maybe providing for wildlife into the design, because you would select specific plants and would maybe create some wildlife habitat in putting that or including that into your design. The rest of the principles, the 7, they are really about managing, how you manage your Florida friendly landscape to make it Florida friendly. Let's start with right plant, right place. And I show you some wrong plants in the wrong location. So the first one is that water fountain with the 2 arboricolas under them. And you might have seen that plant or these plants. They want to grow about 6 feet tall and wide. And they put 2 under in this little planting area under the fountain. And you can guess that they won't be lasting long, because they either have to prune them like crazy, or take one out, or take both out, because they cannot find enough room to develop into their mature size. On the right-hand side, the palm, these foxtail palms, there are 2 problems. They are planted too close to the eaves. Even so, the canopy, the fronds made it already, grew above the roof line there. But I can also see from looking at them that they are not happy in that soil. They look deficient. And they also have some indications of being over pruned, which is another mistake, because probably they are too close to the house. So wrong plant in the wrong location, wrong soil also for these palms. And then on the bottom there, bottom left, you can see the cedars, that they are way too close to the garage. They were probably planted in teeny little plant form and size, and now you cannot open the garage anymore. So I would really argue that these plants don't belong there. And then on the right-hand side, on the bottom, you see the mix of plants in that larger bed there. So the grass needs much more water and fertilizer than the rest of the landscape. The tree, which is a live oak, does not have enough space for that for root development in that area there. So there are different things right there on the bottom picture, the right-hand side, that are also considered wrong plants in the wrong places. And before I forget, we will take questions at the end. So please put your questions into the chat and we'll address them at the end. Jane will read them to me, and then we'll talk about everything that comes up during this class. So please put it in the chat, and then we'll talk about it later. So here are some more wrong plants, or the wrong plant in the wrong location right here. You can see the fern, the holly fern, really unhealthy looking, too much sun, probably the soil is not right, the pH. So it looks really unhealthy. So when you look at this here, this is the same plant in pretty much shade, and it's really has dark green foliage. It's really healthy looking. You can tell this is the right plant for that location. Turf grass, it is also debatable. Very often turf grass is used as a default ground cover because we think that's the easiest to maintain, but it really is not. So when we talk about turf, we talk about purposeful turf. We really want to use turf as an area where we play on, sit on. Maybe you have dogs, or you have somebody uses it for playing on it. So at any rate, when you look at these pictures here, you can see on the bottom right, the upper right, I'm sorry, the upper right and the bottom, the one below the picture below, you can see the grass is not doing well. So mostly under trees where it's too shaded and there's root competition from the trees, grass does very poorly. Then here in the center, where you see that strip of turf, you can see that this is really difficult to maintain. It makes no sense. It's kind of to hold the soil in place, but there are other options that would be much easier to maintain than this. Also, how do you get the irrigation water there without wasting water? And how do you get the fertilizer there without spilling over and having polluted runoff into the parking lot? And then on the bottom here, you can see that slope. This is really hard to mow. And then also the bottom here where you'd have the trees growing within the grassy area, and there's no protection for the trunks, so the machines go right around the trunks of the trees and can damage them. And also lots of work to mow around these trees. And then on the left-hand side here, this large area which looks really, really healthy. This is Bahia grass, which is actually really low in maintenance. It can be low in maintenance. These people resodded. They changed from St. Augustine to Bahia grass, Bahia grass is really drought tolerant. It is, you don't need fertilizer really. So, but does it make sense? Because it's a 55 up community. They don't really use this. They could have incorporated more plants, and we talk about diversity later on. Incorporate maybe more trees, provide some shade, provide a garden, more like a garden setting where people could be and sit and enjoy being out there. So it has its place. That's what I'm saying. Right place, that's a question. Wrong place, definitely. Very often under dense tree canopies, it cannot grow successfully. So what we want to do first is to assess site characteristics. You got to find out before we select plants, how can we find the plants for my specific site? So you look at the site before you design and before you select your plants for your specific site, and that will reduce the use of water, fertilizer, pesticides, and also work. So if you look at this as I really take inventory of my specific landscape site, and it doesn't need to be really the whole yard. You can just maybe tackle a front yard, a problem area. You would look at the type of soils. Mostly we have sandy soils here in Pinellas County. The sun or shade conditions, that really plays a big role in selecting plants. Drainage, do you have standing water? That would be a problem for specific plants if they cannot take that. So again, drainage, structure and obstacles that you need to take into consideration above ground. If you have a building that you want to plant close to, or you have overhead power lines, something like this. Existing vegetation. So anything that you want to look at, is it worthwhile keeping? Is it worthwhile incorporating it into my new landscape? Does it need some attention? So existing vegetation. What problems are you trying to solve? Maybe you have always something that you thought, I need to take care of this, and this is my chance to incorporate that into my landscape design to solve that problem. So after you have done the site analysis, and just to let you know, we teach whole design classes, landscape design classes. I just taught one last week, and I taught one last month because they're really popular. So if you're interested, keep an eye on our classes, or maybe I will teach one in the future here at the Lunch and Learn. So this is crucial for a successful landscape. As I said, once you know your site condition, you've got to have a close look what the plants want to do. So look at the characteristics and also your needs and the needs of the plants. Mature size, that's the first thing you look at. How tall and wide does this plant wants to grow? The reason being is you think it looks really great. I buy it in a 1 gallon container. It has a great, you like the shape of the leaves. You like the size of it. You like the color. It might even have a little flower on it, but you have no clue what it wants to do. Does it want to be a tree? Does it want to be 20 feet tall? You cannot plan as of, I can prune it. Some plants are tolerant to pruning, others are not so much, but you really want to have a low maintenance landscape by not picking plants that need to constantly be kept in check size-wise. So look at the width and the height. This is what you're planning for. And that also determines how many plants you would put in that area, because you would know the mature size and you would space the plants accordingly so that they can grow into their mature size. Does this plant or these plants like sun or shade? Do they like dry or wet feet? Or do they like a medium kind of situation, medium dry or wet? So this is important. Salt tolerance, and that comes into play if you do live close to the coast, if you do get flooded sometimes with salt water, or if you do have a salty well, if you have saltwater intrusion in your well water, if you have a well at home, or if you do use reclaimed water that also contains salts that some plants are not tolerant of. So look into that if you are in that situation. Susceptible to pests and diseases, that's also something that we want to avoid to buy plants that have a known disease or problem, because you don't want to get started out with your landscape having this high maintenance, spraying and taking care of it, figuring out what the problem is. So there's great information, and I will repeat this over and over, probably through my presentation. The extension office here has a lawn and garden help desk, and the two horticulturists, that is their job, to identify problems in the landscape, make suggestions, what to use, what not to use. They are full up to speed as of what new problems are, new diseases, new bugs coming in, affecting specific plants. So this is one resource. And then, of course, there are great resources or information on plants and plant diseases through your IFAS. And that is pretty simple by putting in the search engine the keyword. Let's say you put in specific pests. There's one fact sheet, it's key plants and key pests. So you can see on that fact sheet which plants are sensitive to specific pests. Okay, so we always encourage native plants in the landscape because they're adapted to our local soil conditions and as well as our climate, which can be very extreme, as we know. We get a lot of rainfall in a relatively short period time of the year in the summer. And then if we look at the rest of the year, we have extreme drought sometimes. We have humidity in the summer. We can have dry weather in the spring and in the fall. Then temperature extremes. We can go from very hot to freezes. So we have everything. But native plants, again, need to be in the right location, like all other plants, to be happy and to be successful. But they really do a great job for us, also for our wildlife, because they are preferred by native wildlife. And then providing wildlife habitat that we do really lost a lot in the last decades, specifically in Pinellas County, with being a very urban and built out county. Just four examples I do have for native plants. Blue porterweed is one of them. It's a prostrate growing plant. It's not a creeping ground cover, but it is a ground cover that once you space it 2.5 feet or so, it will cover an area nicely, has this nice purple colored flowers, and attracts butterflies. It's a really easy, very drought tolerant plant. And then the sunshine mimosa, that's also a really low maintenance ground cover that's also called sensitive plant due to the leaves that once you touch them, they fold up. And this could be a turf substitute. This is a whole yard that has just this sunshine mimosa instead of turf grass. Yes, you can mow that. Yes, you can walk on it. You can edge it. You can treat it like turf grass, but keep in mind that you don't want to cut off the flowers, which gives you more plants through reseeding, and also they just look lovely and attract butterflies and pollinators. The firebush is another one of my favorites, and many people love the firebush, not only me. It's a butterfly and hummingbird attractor. The tubular red-orange flowers, they really are on the plant most of the year. There's just 2 months or so when it doesn't do much, this plant. And it's adaptable for full to part sun. It does also, you can plant it in full sun, but it does best in partial sun. Sea grape is another one, very tropical looking plant. It can develop into a large tree. It can be also considered a multiple trunk shrub, and the fruit is edible. So let's talk briefly about what an invasive exotic plant is. These are plants we really want to avoid in our backyards. We want to really be sure that we don't have them and remove them if we do, and don't introduce new ones. The problem with these plants is that they spread extensively into natural areas, and displace native plants and disrupt natural processes. The problem with that is with displacing native plants, they're also displacing native wildlife, and the ecosystem is dramatically changed through these plants. And they spread like wildfire because many of these plants don't have, they find that the really perfect environment here in Florida, and they have no enemies. So some of them you might know. There is the lantana here on the bottom left, which is extremely invasive. There is a native lantana that is not invasive. So be sure that you get the native. You don't get that colorful variety here, but this is really bad news. I saw them in several state parks where they really spread like wildfire. So not a good idea to plant this plant or even to share it. Don't share these plants either. The next one here is air potato. In many of the county parks, you find this. Here around the botanical gardens, we do have them, and they are through the rain now. They're climbing up the trees. Very hard to remove, but what you need to get hold of really are the tubers here. That's the name, hence the name, air potato, to dig them up so that they don't resprout from these tubers. Then the Brazilian pepper on the left-hand side here, most people might know this, very attractive, especially in the winter when they carry the berries. But that's the worst invasive plant that we have in the state of Florida. And then we do have the carrotwood. Same thing like the Brazilian pepper, the berries, they get distributed by the birds and other wildlife. And this is how we have more and more popping up, including in my yard. Some of my neighbors have them. And then we have the Mexican petunia here. This is also a really bad invasive plant that's pretty and very attractive with that really low maintenance and colorful display that they provide. But that's a plant that is really horribly invasive, and the rhizomes and the seeds really contribute to spreading all over the place. So let's go to principle number 2, water efficiently. The largest outdoor use of water is irrigation. So I don't know who of you does have an irrigation system, but 50% of total household use is used for irrigation. If you're using potable or county water, city water for irrigation, that would cover, one watering day would cover for an average lawn or 25 square foot lawn, would cover the domestic water needs for 10 people. I'm pointing this out because the turf grass is really, it's not a food crop. It takes a lot and doesn't really provide anything, not even for wildlife. So this is something, if you don't need, as I said at the beginning, if you don't need all that turf, think about incorporating some plants that really do something not only for you, but also for wildlife and for the environment. So when we look at the water that's available to us, 2% of the water is available, is kept in the polar ice. 97% is salt water. That leaves us with 1% for all other purposes. And all of these sources that you see here, including the reclaimed water, they're all part or all sources of the 1% available fresh water that we do have. So it's the well, lake, pond water, reclaimed water, collected rainwater, and then the potable, which is county or city water. So when we talk about irrigation, and again, some of you might have irrigation, the regular irrigation system is key to protect water resources, that we really use water wisely, because we don't want to waste it due to improper calibration, too much of use, frequency, turf or plant interference, something what you see on the bottom right there, that it sprays against that fence. This is silly, this doesn't make sense, but this is something that I see a lot, that you have a gravel and then you do have a fence and there are no plants that being benefiting from that water. And then misdirected heads and then also clogged nozzles. These are all reasons why we could be reasons to waste water. Overspray like that geyser you see on the bottom on the left-hand side there, maybe a truck or a car drove over it or a landscape equipment and then knocked off the nozzle, and then you have that water not hitting the landscape but the street. So what you want to do with efficient irrigation is you want to reduce the frequency of irrigation in the winter, because many plants go dormant. They don't really want to do a lot. They don't want to grow. They don't want to do anything. This is the ideal time of saving water. Every 10 to 14 days is recommended. It depends a little bit on the weather, the temperature. We can get wet winters, we can get dry winters, we can get warm winters like we had this year. So you have to observe your landscape and the weather to make that judgment call, how much you can reduce. You want to check the weather forecast. So the picture there that you see, I was taking a walk in the evening in my neighborhood, and not only did I notice that broken sprinkler head there that bubbles up, I also, it was raining. Why would you irrigate this time of the day when you have pouring rain? So let your plants tell you when they need water. Stepping on the turf grass and the grass is not coming immediately up, that's a sign. Folded grass blades, if they fold or they get this grayish bluish color, St. Augustine grass, that's a good sign of it needs a drink. You want to design and maintain a drought-tolerant landscape that can survive and thrive mostly on rainfall once it is established. You also want to adhere to local watering restrictions and recommendations. And if you don't mind, please put in the chat how often we are allowed to water in Pinellas County currently. If you know that, please put it in the chat. So you can only water a few times a week, and I'd like to know from you how often, how frequently, so let me know. You have to follow these restrictions. If not, you could get fined. So water in early morning hours because you minimize water loss due to wind drift and evaporation. And you want to irrigate deeply. We recommend 1/2 inch to 1 inch to encourage drought resistance and also bug resistance. So if a plant has a healthy root system, it is more resistant to bugs. Also, you could use a rain barrel to collect rainwater and use a rain gauge. Install a soil moisture sensor or a rain sensor to irrigation system's time clock. That's actually required by law for many years, since 2009. And then when designing group plants according to their needs, to their water needs, so that you can water accordingly. And then maintain adequate, maintain your landscape accordingly. So mulch, let's talk about mulch. You want to maintain 2 to 3 inches of mulch, organic mulch, that helps retain the moisture in the ground, reduce erosion, suppresses weeds, and it also moderates soil temperature. And remember, when we talked about it can get very cold here, it can get very hot here. Plants like a moderate, the roots of the plants, like a moderate temperature. They don't like to go from extreme hot to warm. So if they get that through the mulch, they are much more healthy. And also the mulch breaks down, providing soil. There are some good mulches available. The only mulch that we don't recommend is cypress mulch, because they started after cypress mulch became so popular to harvest it from the wetlands, and it wasn't a byproduct of the lumber industry any longer. So we need to have the cypress trees in the wetlands to help us recharge our aquifer, clean the water, and help with erosion and all that. So we don't want them harvested for mulch. So all the other mulches are really good. Eucalyptus is has a similar appearance to cypress mulch. Then we do have the melaleuca. That's another really good woody mulch that is heavy and doesn't float as easily. And then we do have pine bark and pine straw. And then we have also recycled yard waste available in the county parks for pickup. You can also pick it up at solid waste. They can dump it into your truck if you don't have a truck bed. And then oak leaves. They are free and they make wonderful mulch and wonderful soil down the road when they break down. Principle number 4 is recycling. So what we want to do in a Florida-friendly landscape is keep the grass clippings on the ground, because they help us recycle nitrogen back into the turf, into the turf grass. Yard trimmings could be recycled on site, provided they provide also added nutrients to the soil, and they also help to reduce waste disposal. So when you talk to solid waste, they always encourage to not put yard waste into the garbage bin. They really want us to recycle them and bring them to either a brush site like we have in St. Petersburg, or recycle them where they can get back into a compost, into the garden. Let's just touch briefly on compost benefits. Again, this is a class by itself. Compost improves soil condition and structure. Also, it increases water and nutrient holding ability. You can save money by using less fertilizer and water because, the water holding ability increases with mulch, with compost. It helps return the organic materials that I just talked about to the soil and keeps them out of landfills and water. Also, you support living organisms. So you have a nice food web going on there that really helps also to feed other critters like birds and so forth. So I just want to mention quickly, if you do use compost and you, let's say, amend the soil, if it's a smaller or large area, it will not stay like this. Composting means, and you probably might have heard from veggie gardening, it's an ongoing process. Compost goes back to what it was before. At one point, you will have, again, sandy soils. So the reason why we really foster the idea of using the right plant in the right location is that you use a plant that can tolerate exactly the soil that you have. For ornamental plants, if you do have a veggie garden, if you are planning for a specialty garden, let's say roses or something that really cannot tolerate our sandy soils and the high pH, then you would say, I have an area where I amend the soil, and I do that at least, let's say, once a year, or depending how quickly it breaks down. So what can be composted? Anything that was once a plant. Anything that's really simple to remember. So no meat products, anything like that should go into a compost. Principle number 5, use fertilizers appropriately. And what we like to say is less is often best. Don't fertilize if plants don't need it. Over-fertilization can really contribute to and could have a negative impact on the environment, on your yard and the environment. So only fertilize when plants are deficient or if you do have a reason. And what I mean by that is if you do have a veggie garden, if you do have an edible landscape, that's a different story. If you do have turf grass, specifically St. Augustine, and depending on the type of water you have, as I said earlier, reclaimed water has salt, but also nutrients. If you don't have that, you might have to fertilize your turf grass probably twice a year, but only when needed. So that applies to the other plants, to ornamental landscapes. Get soil tested. You want to know what's going on before you buy the appropriate fertilizer. And then do not fertilize during drought because plants want to grow when you fertilize, and then you need to supplement water. So as needed, to maintain the health of lawns and ornamental landscape plants. Usually mature landscape plants, if they are in the right location, don't need supplemental fertilizer. Right plant, right place, remember that. You want to use slow release fertilizers, 50% or more nitrogen in slow release forms. They are included. This is a requirement of the county. It's in the ordinance. You want to adhere to local fertilizer ordinance as of also not using fertilizers during the summer period from June 1st through September 30th. Fertilizers containing nitrogen. Anything else can be used. There's another exception for phosphorus. We cannot use phosphorus in Pinellas County year-round because it was proven that we have enough of it in the soil. So you really want to make sure that there is a deficiency before you apply fertilizers. Always read the label. And when you have reclaimed water, as I said, reduce fertilization. Principle number 6, providing for wildlife. This is one of my close to my heart because we are an urban county and we are really basically paved over. So plants in our yard can provide food, water, and shelter. This are the 3 key elements that we need to for all life actually, but also for attracting wildlife. And just to show you this, it could be in the form of a birdhouse. You could, of course, plant plants that provide berries, such as this holly tree on the right-hand side there, nectar plants for pollinators and butterflies. And then shelter could also be provided in form of a tree. I have a really dense hedge that I noticed that the mockingbirds like to nest in there. And believe it or not, they share the space with a snake. the black racer snake. So, but they seem to live together somehow. So why create wildlife habitat? It's really important to keep in mind that we have really a lot of habitat loss due to agriculture and development, building. Supporting and creating ecosystems is key. So what you can do is to provide a food source. You can also protective cover for small fish if you have a backyard pond. A source of nesting material for birds and small mammals. That should be also part of your landscape plan. You don't need to be a sloppy gardener, but if you have little bits and pieces of little twigs coming down from your tree, could be nesting material for birds, let's say. So leave a little bit of untidy. I'm not saying untidy, but a little bit of material that birds can use for and other critters too, use for nesting. Shade for humans and wildlife. That means creating a landscape that has some trees in it, space allowing, of course, and then nectar for small insects and pollinators. That's all what you can do to support creating ecosystems. I also want to mention that pollinators are responsible for about 35% of our food crop, to pollinate that. So, and with losing habitat and losing pollinators, we might be in dire strait and need to come up with other solutions to pollinate our food crops. Principle number 7 is reducing stormwater runoff. And that's a topic that many people find kind of, what do I have to do with it? We want to really make sure that water that could run off the landscape, we want to learn or acknowledge that everything that runs off our landscape can carry soil, debris, fertilizers, pesticides, car oil from the driveway, cigarette butts. If there's anything on the way, it could really take it along and it could harm water quality. Reduction of runoff, it will help prevention of pollution of rivers, ponds, lakes, Tampa Bay, and the Gulf of Mexico. So anything we can do to hold all that stuff that I just mentioned up there, if we can hold that on site, that would contribute and prevent and reduce pollution into our body of waters. So what you see here is a rain garden. That is a great way to landscape. And if you have a little bit of an area where you could collect that water running down from the street and from the landscape, the plants in that rain garden, they help filter what's running into that. If it's fertilizers, specifically fertilizers. And then you also have a great feature there. I mean, this is not a pond. This is not a standing water situation. But if you have a part of your landscape that would hold the water for a little bit, that would be a good situation for a rain garden. So plants in the rain garden, they would tolerate both. They would tolerate wet feet as well as drought. When it gets dry here, they would also tolerate that situation. Then, of course, rainwater harvesting. This is a topic we teach that once a month, usually. If you're interested in learning about rainwater harvesting, like in buying a rain barrel, as a Pinellas County resident, you can buy that here at our classes. We are teaching a class in Brooker Creek on Saturday. It's still time to sign up. If you go to our website, I can also share the link with you later. This is Brooker Creek Preserve on Saturday. So this everybody who lives North County, that's ideal, at 10:30. And then, of course, cisterns, that's a step up of collecting rainwater. This is more of a bigger undertaking, but there's some homeowners in the county that do have cisterns and make use of that water. So why are we concerned about stormwater runoff? Either going down the drain, water quality concerns, as I said before, 86% of our waters are impaired in Pinellas County, and environmental management is super busy testing and also contributing to cleaning it up, which is very costly. And the taxpayer is footing the bill. So prevention is key, as I said. So runoff and leaching of fertilizers, pesticides, and all that can contaminate our groundwater through leaching and also surface water sources. So the more we can keep on site and not having it run off, the better off we are. So some prevention practices are that you fertilize, as I said before, appropriately or as needed. Use pesticides, again, only if needed. And the extension help desk is here to identify problems and what kind of pest you have, or if it's a pest at all, a bug that is beneficial or not. You want to dispose of pet waste properly. So scoop the poop. That was a slogan that the Tampa Bay Estuary program was using for years. So keep that in mind. Recycle yard trimmings, leaves and clippings. Do not litter. Don't drop anything. Sometimes accidentally we drop something, but don't drop anything. If you drop, pick it up. Collect rainwater in rain barrels or cisterns. Create rain gardens in swales. So here are just some ideas of if you drop something or people litter, then decomposition times, once this get into the storm system, that is not going away, that stuff. So if you look at the glass bottle, that's undetermined. Cigarette filters up to 13 years. Styrofoam cups, 200 years. Aluminum cans, 400 years. So this is not breaking down. This is just will be staying in the environment forever, basically. So with that, it might give an idea that littering is a real problem. Principle number 8, managing yard pests responsibly. And if you look at that percentage, that less than 1% of insects are pests, this is really something that you need to keep in mind for looking at some of the critters that you see in your landscape that look really, really ugly, but that might be super beneficial insects. Normally, if you don't spray a lot and don't have the ecosystem in your garden out of balance, beneficial insects normally keep the bad insects under control. So what you want to do if you use pesticides, you want to keep in mind that they cannot only harm the bug, the bugs, they can also harm people, pets, and beneficial organisms, and also the environment. So be careful with using pesticides. And what you see here is a lady beetle, very busy eating aphids. And here the lady beetle larvae, which is not a pretty little bug, it's kind of looking. It also feeds on the aphids. Managing yard pests, you want to check on a regular basis by scouting. You want to check out your plants if something has changed, curled leaves, spots in the grass, something that looks different. And if you know your landscape, if you are in touch with your landscape, you just come in the door and have a look on to the left and to the right, and maybe you have a stroll through your backyard a few times a week, and you see the changes in the early stages, you can take action. You want to use the non-chemical approach before you use pesticides. You want to use environmentally friendly pesticides such as soaps, environmental soaps, or oils. You want to avoid routine applications and so-called preventive applications of pesticides because you cannot do much preventively about bugs. So you got to really wait, like the bottom picture there. If you do have a chinch bug problem in the turf grass, you hopefully discover it early enough, detect it early so that you can treat just the area and a few feet beyond that affected area so that you don't have to kill off everything else that you would kill by using this broadcast application method. Principle number 9, protect the waterfront. And I always look at it like Pinellas County. We basically are all waterfront owners because we live on a peninsula. But specifically for these people who live at a pond or at the coast or at the intracoastal, it really is up to all of us and specifically to these folks to protect the waterfront. You want to plant a border of low maintenance plants, ideally native plants, between your lawn and shoreline to absorb the nutrients. What I said before is the same with the rain garden situation, that plants planted along the border of a body of water, they absorb the nutrients, provide wildlife habitat, and they also are here for erosion control. Protecting the waterfront also means to remove invasive exotic plants. We talked about that before. There are also plants that are not only terrestrial plants invasive, they're also plants in the water that can do a lot of harm, like the water lettuce or the water hyacinth. And we do have some here in the MAK Creek at the Botanical Gardens that they scooped up a few years ago. And you just miss a few and they're coming back, not as quickly, but you got to keep an eye on those. If you're a boater, if you're out and using your boat, you want to make sure that you don't pick up something with your boat and transport it to other places, to other bodies of water with your boat. So that's something you also should pay attention to. You want to establish a 10 to 20 foot no chemical zone along the shoreline. That's really important because you don't want to have the water, the chemicals running into that water without being a little bit diluted, or at least not running straight into that body of water. So the conclusion is of that concept, by adopting these Florida-friendly landscaping principles, we all can, even if we do have small yards, or even if we only have a little patio with some plants, we can really save water and money and help to protect our precious resources, and will contribute to an environment that is not only healthy for us, but also for generations to come. And I think we have a responsibility to hand something over to other generations that they can enjoy as we did. And with that, I'm back to the 6 pictures here. And I'd like you to have another look now that you learned what the 9 principles are about. And please put in the chat, we are also a very small group. We could also unmute even. So let me know which of these do you think could be considered Florida friendly. Thinking about all the principles as of protecting water resources, using as little water as possible, don't use fertilizer or use very little of it or as needed. Pesticides, same thing. You only want to use pesticides as needed and want to use them responsibly. You want to think about protecting the waterfront. You want to think about creating wildlife habitat. So which of these yards do you think can contribute to that? And you can either put it in the chat, or we can open the microphones and we can talk about that. And so before
There's nothing in the chat for as far as the answers right now.
Okay, I will ask them directly then. So do you have any questions for me, Jane?
Let me scroll up and start from the beginning. There was a question earlier when we were talking about the turf grass and it not thriving under the shaded tree areas. And do you have any suggestions what could be, how do you make that area nicer, what you could plant under that shaded tree so that it would survive? Okay, that could be a tricky situation. And I'm really honest, and I'm always very honest. You have to really check out your individual situation. If the root system is really, really dense, let's say you do have, let's just assume you have a live oak tree there, it's 50 years old, and or if it's just 30 years old, and the root system is very dense, the tree roots will always win the battle because they need the space, they will take over, and they might not allow anything between these roots. If the tree is not as dense, I mean the root system, you could try to plant case number 1. If that is the case, you would just create a self-mulching area. Let the leaves fall and drop on the ground and have a self-mulching area, and maybe plant something around the perimeter of your landscape. It could be an ornamental grass. It could be something that would frame in your landscape. It's just a very little and very small plants that don't require a lot of space for roots. So nothing woody, probably more something like a grassy type of plant. That's scenario number 1, self-mulching areas under trees. Number 2 would be, if the root system is not too dense, what you could do is to try to get a shovel in there carefully and see, without disturbing or destroying too much of the root system, if you could get a shovel in there and with that a plant. Smaller plants might be suitable too. So you want to not go with a 1 gallon, you might want to go with a 4-inch pot, little seedlings that you could plug into that, in between that root system. A ground cover. I'm talking about a ground cover. It could be something like a mondo grass, which is when you can buy it small. You could maybe get it in there. It really depends how dense the root system is and how dense the shade is. So again, these are the 2 scenarios that I would suggest for the situation. And there's one here that Nicole responded to my question on watering frequency allowed as of watering restrictions. And yes, that is correct. 2 times a week, not from 10 to 4.
And before we forget, Jane, you might want to pull up the poll so that we can let people just fill that in for me quickly. That really is appreciated, just to show us how we do here, how much you learned, and how we maybe be able to improve as well. So
all right, so
other...
I'm sorry, I did bring it up. If you cannot see it, let me know. I think that
I do see it. I do see
great.
it. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
All right. So go ahead and just, you can click on and select there and submit your poll.
And you've got to scroll a little down. There are 4 questions. So if you see number 1 and 2, if you scroll down, you have 4 questions there that we'd like you to respond to, before and after.
Yeah, and if you haven't been watching the chat, I did put a link into the help desk at IFAS Extension.
Excellent.
And I also put in the Eventbrite registration link for the Brooker Creek class.
Oh, I love you, Jane. You're so good. Okay, and any other questions we do have?
Anyone else for the poll? It's open. Right now, we've got about half the people that participated. So go ahead and just click on it and let us know.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, Deanne, she said, Deanne or Dean, is it Dean? Dean said, from all the pictures we are showing here, she says D, she would consider D as Florida friendly. C, Michelle, C and F, okay. And C because D is gross. I like that comment. And I'll explain in a minute. Any other ideas? What do you think is Florida friendly here in these pictures? Any other takers? Any other input here? Okay, let me go through that quickly here. We just have a few more minutes left. And if you have questions, more questions, just put them in the chat in the meantime. Let me explain. Without knowing what they're doing, but just looking at it, picture number A, I would say the grass is very green. They use probably a lot of fertilizer, and they don't have anything really that provides for wildlife. Nothing there that I think would be Florida friendly in that regards. B is a little better. They do have 3 native palms in the front. These are the royal palms. And yes, they could provide for wildlife, taking that they leave the flower stalks and the seeds there that wildlife could feed on, and don't over prune them. So maybe birds could nest in them. But the rest, and then they have a retention area. You see that little ditch there between the palms and the backyard there, the rest of the yard. So so they filter with their turf grass. So turf grass can be a filter if it's healthy. But other than that, it's not much that it does either for Florida friendly. Then C, when you look at that, that could be Florida friendly. Without knowing what they're doing, I would assume they don't fertilize, because there's really nothing to fertilize. They have a little bit of turf grass there, but it doesn't look like it's highly nutrient rich, so it doesn't look like it's fertilized. I would say from the looks of it, yes, that could be Florida friendly, definitely. D, that's a big no-no. The reason being is you are really having not a yard, you have a gravel yard here, and gravel is not part of a Florida friendly landscape. It's not accepted as mulch because, first of all, you're creating more heat. You don't have a lot of plants. The few plants that they do have probably suffer through that heat. And then wildlife, very poor. There's no diversity in there. There's nothing for wildlife really. So nope, D doesn't get an approval. E doesn't get approval because that's Epcot. And guess what? Lots of fertilizer, lots of 24/7 needs to look great. And that's the goal there. The runoff into that pond, look at that green grass and look at all these flowers. They probably fertilize and that runs straight into that body of water. No diversity, just pretty and just colorful. Okay, that has a purpose too, but I would not consider this Florida friendly. Then the last picture that you see, F, that is a Florida friendly landscape. I designed it, I installed it, I maintained it for some years, and I did make some mistakes, but it is certified. It's Florida Friendly certified. It's now called recognition. It's not called certified anymore, but it's the same concept, just that we need to go back after 2 years and look at it again if it's still up to par to the concept of Florida Friendly landscaping. So yes, so it uses very little water, this landscape, number F there. The right plant at the right location. I did all my homework. I researched all the plants, took a soil test. Most of it is micro irrigation. So it's drip irrigation. So we are using very little water there. And then no turf grass. The homeowner didn't want any turf grass. He just wanted to have ground covers. So yes, this would be considered Florida friendly, or is a Florida friendly yard. And with that, we're almost there. Do we have anything else that people or participants like to ask? Oops, guess I have to take class again. No, you got it. I mean, it could be Florida friendly as of water conserving. It really is from that regards, but it doesn't provide the other principles that we discussed today. So what else? Any other questions? Anybody likes to speak up, comment, say anything? You can either unmute or you can put it in the chat. Any comments, anything else you'd like to ask? This is your moment. Okay.
Sounds like you just did such a great job that nobody has any questions, Doris.
That's the way you can look at it too. Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
That's right.
I did want to share that Doris will be back in a couple of months to teach another class more in depth. I don't remember off the top of my head because it's a little ways from now.
No, it's actually not me. It's my coworker, Melissa. And she will talk about pollinators.
Okay.
Yeah, let me look it up quickly, but I'm pretty sure. She will talk about, let's see. Where is she? I thought it was in August, but I'm pretty sure it's her. Maybe it's not August, maybe it's September. But at any rate, I'm pretty certain, but it doesn't matter. Either one of us will teach. And so please come and join us. And we have many more topics to discuss and talk about and share with you. So yeah, please come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you missed it, urban horticulturist Theresa Badurek also has taught some classes for us. In June, she taught a getting ready for fall planting. So now that you have some sense about Florida friendly landscaping, if you are looking at doing a vegetable garden in Florida, now's the time to plan. I put in the chat a link to our current classes, and if you scroll all the way down, you'll see previous class recordings, and you'll be able to see gardening recordings there as well. So,
okay, that's excellent. I mean, this is really kind of building on what you already learned and learning new things, and then you can ask questions when we come back and say, I did that and it didn't work for me, or can you give me more information on that? So this is great. This is wonderful.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. We're sort of at the top of the hour here. We wish you a wonderful day. Doris, thanks again. Great class.
Yeah. And thank you, Jane, for putting this on and helping me moderate or observing here the chat. And if you don't mind, if you could save the poll for me and provide that to me, that would be really wonderful.
I sure did. Thank you.
All right. And with that, have a good afternoon, everybody. And thank you again for being here.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.